Afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a good Monday afternoon. Thank you for joining us. This is the part 3 of the series of building mathematical connections. Today, we've talked about language modeling. We've talked about exploration of math and play and investigation, right? That was the first series. The second webinar took us more into mathematical inquiry. And what does that look like, right? We practice a lot of transforming lower level questions into higher level questions. And today we're going to continue that, right? Because that's a critical part of incorporating math and literacy is asking really good questions, right? We also shared some tools with you all that you can use to practice. There is a PowerPoint, so it should be shared with you. If it's not, then we'll make sure to share it with you. There is a hand out there. Thank you for that, Julie. And then today we're getting into other connections, right? So we did a lot of math, and during the second webinar, we talked about building relationships between math concepts. So today, on a similar route, we're going to look at how do we build math connections with literature, right? How do you build relationships, the relationships that exist between math and literature, and math and science, more specifically mathematical physics, which is pretty cool stuff, right? Like we have to be able to provide these high quality interactions with the children. And there's so many possibilities. So we're going to talk about that today. So some of our goals and objectives for today, again, focusing on mathematical relationships, this time with literature and with science engineering experiences. We're going to talk about the role that math talk has with children. I'm also going to show you this really cool protocol that I created. It's called a thinking protocol, which is like a 10-step process that teachers can use to intentionally promote critical thinking long-term. And so we'll talk about that today. Here's my book, Mathematizing an Emergent Math Curriculum Approach for Young Children. I am an emergent curriculum practitioner, as a lot of us are. And so this book is not, it just demonstrates how an approach can be used to build teachers' creativity and thoughts and practice. So it's not a pre-described curriculum, but it gives an approach, right? So that teachers can incorporate math in anything that they see and in everywhere that they're with children in the classroom. We talked about the mathematizing approach, and basically this is the 3-part series. Is the first one was about observing for rich math context, right? What's the math that children are doing at the moment? Where are their hearts and minds at the moment? Wherever that is, that's the perfect opportunity to teach math. Find rich context, exploring materials. Many times before we engage children in language or inquiry, we want to give them some really cool materials, right? Some really curious and interesting materials and toys, and have them explore it. And through that exploration, we'll be able to see what they're interested in, right? What math properties and attributes are they processing at the moment of play? So if they're at the water table, are they filling and dumping, right? That's volume. The block area, are they stacking up? That's height. Are they doing a castle? That's perimeter and height and length and width and all of that. Are they drawing? Those are lines, right? Long lines, short lines, zigzag lines. There's so many. Even when they're writing their letters, anytime a child writes a letter, you can explain it. It has to be explained mathematically, right? Like for the letter A, there's a starting point, and then you write at an angle up, right? Diagonally up to another point, and then down at an angle, and then across. it's all pure math language anytime children write letters. And so something as simple as that, when they're writing letters, use math language, right? And that's how you incorporate the math in that. We talked about language modeling, how we have to develop our math grammar. And that's a combination of knowing the 5 math strands, so algebra, geometry, data analysis, number sense, measurement, and then the vocabulary that comes with all of those concepts. And we have to combine that with rich language modeling techniques. So labeling, expanding, extending language, parallel and spiral talk, and engaging, and then taking those 2 aspects, the rich vocabulary and the rich language modeling techniques, put them together and engage them in sustained, in-depth, and ongoing conversations. So it's not enough just to, talk to a child one time or even twice, but keep going, right? Have them help them engage in what they're doing. If they're talking, get them to keep talking. If they're building something, help them expand it and extend it and so forth. And then the last part, we talked about inquiry. We did a lot, and we're going to work on that right now as a review. How to implement high-level questioning patterns to develop problem-solving, reasoning, and proof skills. And also towards the end of today, we'll talk about some protocol, thinking protocol that I created for teachers. All right, so before I keep going, I'm going to pause for a minute and ask if any of you, what have you done with the what information you received previously? Were you able to implement it? Were you able to share it? Were you able to try it out? Let's hear some feedback from you all. We'll take about 30 seconds to a minute. Or any questions you might have from the previous content. All right, well, if you have any, feel free to put it on the chat and I'll be more than happy then to follow up with you all. All right, so let's get started. If you can all take, we have one, your statement about outcomes, not just impact stays. Oh, good. That's right. Remember, outcomes means short-term and impact is long-term, right? So that's something to consider. If you're working with teachers, oh, good. Thank you, Latanya. Awesome. You have a teacher institute. That sounds fancy. Coming up, that's awesome. And wanting some resources to share. Awesome. Yes. Anytime we have teachers lesson plan, part of that planning has to be prediction, right? Like what are the outcomes? What is the impact that this is going to have on children? So it's always good to put that in your questions towards in your reflective supervisions or your conversations with others. Always focus on outcomes and impact. Awesome. So if you could take out your questioning patterns chart. We covered this last time. We're going to review it. This is a fundamental piece that can transform the way teachers engage children in rich inquiry. And so if you recall, there's 5 columns, but 4 of them. So the first one is just the number line. And that just means, remember that we record teachers' interactions with children. And you can do that yourselves. You can videotape, you can audio tape. What we did is we record teachers for about 10 minutes in the block area or water table area and so forth. And then we transcribe all the questions that the teachers asked. So we're not transcribing all the conversation because that's kind of long. But if you can transcribe the questions that the teacher asked, right? And you write those down. And then you code the questions using this tool. So we code each question that the teacher asked to see what kind of questioning approach she used, what kind of content she used, what type of question she used, and the questioning style, right? And as you code each one of those 4 columns, you start filling the page down and you start seeing some patterns. And that's where the critical thinking happens, because the teacher now is able to analyze herself, analyze the kinds of questions they're asking, practice transforming those questions into other kinds of questions to see, to practice and to be able to have that skill set where they're able to ask higher order questions organically and at will at any time and within any context. So let's recall each one of those because it's super important, and then we'll use these later on as we're thinking about mathematical literature. And so the first one is your approach, and the approach demonstrates how an educator begins to engage children in their thinking process. And so there's 3 opportunities that I present here, right? And we talk about when you approach a conversation with a child and you're asking questions, you can approach it through a teacher-directed lens, a teacher-guided lens, or a child-centered lens, right? So when it's teacher-directed, the cognitive activity, right, all those neurons that are shooting in the brain, when it's teacher-directed, it's mainly on the teacher side, right? And sometimes that's okay, that's important, that's a starting point. Most of these questions are easy for children to answer. They're mostly closed-ended questions. And if it's a closed-ended question, either it's a 1 or 2 word response, or if it's something that the child, it's something that the child already knows, if they provide a sentence, it's still considered a closed-ended question because it's something they know. So they can still speak in sentences, but if it's something they know, it's still considered closed-ended question, a closed-ended question. And it's also memory-based. And though memory-based questions are good to find out what the child knows about something, but it's not considered critical thinking, okay? Teacher-guided questions, the cognitive activity is shared by both the educator and the child. They're semi-challenging, and they're scaffolded questions. And so in this opportunity, both the educator's cognitive activity is going and also the child, both of them. And one example, when a child is building upwards, right, with blocks, and it keeps falling over, it keeps tipping over. If we take a look, it's usually an alignment problem at the bottom, where there's 2 blocks that are not aligned, right? If it was balanced, it would be science, but this is the math part, and it's not aligned. And so if we ask the child, if we look at the bottom of your tower, do you see any alignment problems that could potentially be tipping over the tower, right? So that's guided. You're not giving the answer, but you're scaffolding, right? You're giving a little clue, and that's what teacher-guided questions are. You guide the child to the truth of something without giving them the answer, and those are important as well. And then you have child-centered questions. And these, the cognitive activity is mostly on the child's side. And these become more challenging because now the child has to think critically about the question and about solving the problem. And it's holistic reasoning and a lot of problem-solving opportunities. And so we're going to give some examples based off of the Stone Soup book. So hopefully you've all read that in the past. It's a classic, right? There's multiple versions of Stone Soup. And basically you have 3 individuals. In one book, they're soldiers. In another book, they're monks. In another book, it's a family. There's different versions of the book. And they go into a village and they have no money and they're hungry, right? but they do have a pot for some reason. And they asked the villagers to add food items, right? Different kinds of food items to the soup so that they can share together. And so if this was a teacher-directed experience, some of the questions would include how the soldiers or monks how many were there looking for food, right? And if we read the book to the children, there'd be 3. So children would answer 3, teacher, 3, Mr. Allen, or 3. What food did the villagers add to the cooking pot, right? So if you read the book, they would know that. How many characters were there at the end of the story? They would just have to count, right? How many were there? And so those are teacher-directed questions. These are good starting points just to get the brain going, right? So teacher-directed questions are good to find out what a child knows. And also it's a starting point. It gets that brain activity started. It's not critical thinking, but it gets it started. With teacher-guided questions, it's 50-50, right? So some of the questions can include, how else could the 3 strangers find more food in the village? So here it's a little bit tougher, right? The children would have to think about it because they know what happened in the book, but now they have to come up with some more ideas. And usually they'll say whatever they eat, right, at home, or what they purchase in the stores, like milk and chips and cookies and all of that. And that's perfectly fine as long as we get them thinking, right? That's what matters. How else could the strangers warm up the soup? That's a good one. What else can the community do to help feed the strangers? And then child-centered questions are all having them think about a solution on their own, right? There's no guidance, there's no scaffolding. So why do you think the strangers walk so far away from home? That's an open-ended question, and it's whatever the child interprets, right? It's whatever they come up with, whatever their reasoning. How would you cook a soup to feed the whole village? And what ideas can you come up with to help the strangers navigate their way home? So these are all child-centered questions. With content, we talked about when you code the questions, are they math questions or not, right? And we put those in the sheet. Are they number sense? If it is, it's something like, how many villagers will the soup feed, right? That's quantity. What different shapes do you see in the village town square? We can look at the illustrations. There's going to be tons of shapes there. What temperature do you think is needed to cook the soup? That's measurement. What patterns do you see on the villagers' clothing items, right? That's algebra. And how many of you would have their food to the community, or add their food to the community soup, right? So when you get all the children raising their hands, you count how many. You can put that on a chart, or it could be verbally, and that's data analysis. In terms of the type, this demonstrates whether they're open-ended questions or closed-ended questions. And remember, open-ended questions is all about generating ideas. That's basically what it is. Closed-ended questions are simple, they're single word phrases, reaffirms or clarifies, and it's attention focusing. Open-ended questions are more challenging. It elicits an elaborate response. It generates ideas and promotes reasoning. So some examples based off of the stone soup. How many strangers are in there in the beginning of the story? And this is where the mathematical literature component comes into play, right? You're reading a book, but you're still asking math questions. And that's what makes it a mathematical literature experience. How many items did the strangers add to the soup? What can we use to heat the soup? Right? That's measurement. How many characters are there at the end of the story? And then open-ended questions. How many food items would you and your family share with the strangers? Can you think of a way to obtain money to help the strangers? How far do the strangers have to travel to reach the next village? And what can we build the strangers to make their travels easier? Ooh, that's a good engineering one. Then we get into the last column, which is the inquiry style. This is all about higher order thinking. So attention focusing, recall, those are considered lower level thinking questions because they're all memory based. Okay. For attention focusing, we know if we want their attention to focus on something from the book, we ask that kind of question. Recall is all about memory based, right? Remembering events from the story. And then you get into the middle level thinking, conjecture, if it's math, prediction, if it's literature, comparison, those are considered, they're a little bit more challenging. And the last three are the hardest ones, right? Reasoning, problem posing, and proof. So we want to be able to balance these out, whether it's you're reading a book or you're engaging in toys or other activities. Some examples for the lower level thinking: what's missing in the stranger's pot? How many rocks did the strangers add to the soup? Right, those are all memory based. What would happen if there was too much food added to the soup? Oh, that's a good one. Good prediction or conjecture. How many ingredients does your family add to your soup at home? Why do you think the strangers added rocks to the soup? That's reasoning. And then what can the community do to help hungry strangers in the future? That's a really good question. Awesome. All right, so we're going to practice together using some questions. So I'm going to need you to get ready in the chat. And so we've all read the book Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right? My version is that, Goldilocks breaks in and she, what does she do? She eats the food, she breaks the chair, she sleeps, and then she runs away, right? That's so inappropriate, but it's funny. And the children love the idea of having three bears family there. So that's kind of funny. But if we want to incorporate mathematics within this literature, then we got to look at the 5 strands first, right? Number sense, geometry, measurement, algebra, and data analysis. We can ask our questions based off of any of these 5 math strands, based off of the pictures, the illustrations in the book. So let's practice together. So here you have the 3 bears. You see the porch is super hot, right? So they're walking out to give the porch some time to cool off. So in this scenario, what math inquiry opportunities do you see? So when you look at this illustration, and you think about the 5 math strands, right? What math inquiry opportunities do you see? So Cheryl says, how many bears are there? Number sense, for sure. Counting is number sense. Yeah, what else? And challenge yourself, right? Remember what I talked about in the beginning. Number sense, geometry tend to be, they're super important. They are considered more lower, that's the lower level math, but it's super important, it's the foundation. Measurement is in the middle, algebra is harder, data analysis is harder, right? So that's the hierarchy of cognitive demanding opportunities in math. So geometry, let's see, yeah, Courtney says comparisons. Geometry, says Julie, door open, leaves falling, steam rising. Yeah, absolutely. What else? Take a look at their clothing items. Take a look at the patterns in the door. Take a look at the tree, the window, the frames. What other math strands? Tanya mentioned size, comparison, number, sorting, counting. Yes, absolutely. Even the tiny little mushrooms, if you see them on the bottom right corner, right? Those have patterns. It's a lot of patterns here. Temperature, yeah, that's a good one, Sheila. Temperature from the porch. Awesome, let's move to the next one. So here comes Goldilocks, right? And in one of the books, it says that she's a naughty little girl. And she's very curious, even though her mama said, don't go into the forest. And what did she do? She went into the forest, of course. And then when you look at this illustration, what are some more math opportunities? So data analysis. Oh, Cheryl, she says, would you go into the house? That's excellent. If you ask a group of children to raise their hands to see if who would go into the house, right? That's data analysis. It could be verbally. If you say, oh, 7 out of 10 of you said they would go into the house. That's data analysis. If you have a chart paper, you can always chart it on the paper, right? And then do it that way. Ordinality, yes, absolutely. Yep, you can ask questions about what was the first scene and what happened next, and what was the third one, and so forth. Counting flowers on the ground, yes, absolutely. Why is there steam coming from the bowl? Oh, yeah, I love that. That's a nice temperature question. Mm-hmm. Positional words. Thank you, Sheila. Yeah. Some more to consider. Look at Goldilocks, what she's wearing, the leaves from the tree, the patterns in the bird's wings, and so forth. Even the patterns from the flowers, right? There's so many patterns there. Those are pretty cool. All right, another illustration. And if you can tell, I'm taking you step by step, right? The events that happened, the major events that happened in the book. So on one side, you have Goldilocks, and she's eating the porridge, right? Naughty little girl, this the mama said, or the author said, actually. But she seems like she's having a good old time. So what are some possible math inquiry opportunities in this one? On one side, she's tasting the porridge. She finds it delicious. On the other side, she breaks the chair. Size comparison. Yes, very good. That's a good one. What else do you see? Shapes. More shapes. Yes. Chairs, some have circles, green, one has lines. Yeah, patterns, right? Absolutely. Awesome. Well, as you can see that it's endless. There's so many opportunities. You can mathematize all of this, from the bowls, to the spoons, to the chairs, to what Goldilocks is wearing, and so forth. All right, and then this is the last scene here. In this scene, remember, Goldilocks sleeps on the baby bear's bed. She's having a good old time. And the bears come in. They don't seem, well, Papa Bear doesn't seem too happy there. All right, so Misty talks about quantity in the bowl. What other math opportunities there? Why did she fall? How many legs does a chair need to stand? Excellent, that's a good question. Look at Goldilocks sleeping. What kind of nice math questions could you ask there? Let's focus on measurement, right? So measurement has, volume, time, length, width, diameter. Do you think she would have fit in the father's bear? Oh yeah, that's a good question. Yes. Does Goldilocks fit in that bed? Mm-hmm. Yes, very good. Awesome. All right, let's move on. And then this is the last one. If you recall, Goldilocks takes off. She doesn't say anything. Baby bear's trying to wave her down, but nope, she's gone. And there's a lot of math here, right? Some opportunities like how far is she traveling? How far is her house? How fast is she running? How much taller is she than the baby bear? That porridge is still hot, that's right. You're right. You would have thought after her taking a nap and everything, that porridge would have been cold, right? Thanks for pointing that out, Julie. That's funny. Okay. All right. So this is really important. So I would love for you all to take out your lesson planner. And what this is, it's not a lesson plan, it's a lesson planner, right? Because it's a one-pager. And I do that on purpose so that teachers can, in the beginning, create this kind of a framework within themselves, right? That we're going to, if many teachers read books multiple times throughout the day. Some teachers read them twice, 3 times, 4 times, right? Like there's different circle times or whole group gatherings. But I always suggest at least one of those circle times should be an instructional read aloud, right? And instructional read alouds are different than recreational read alouds or reading for fun. An instructional read aloud would have some of these components within it. And so you would write the name of the book. So in this case would be Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Relevant concepts, right? So this is where you might say, wow, Goldilocks has a lot of patterns because most of the things are patterns of 3. So you might put down there patterns, or you might put some other math or literacy concepts there. Your content objectives. There's a form that I shared with you all. Here, let me pull it up so you can see it. Stop that. All right, so you all should have this Bloom's Taxonomy and Thinking Math Verbs illustration. So when you're writing objectives, objectives for your lesson plans, one of these thinking verbs should be embedded. Okay. So for example, the children would describe what Goldilocks was doing in the house, right? That's a remembering opportunity. That's a remembering objective. Interpreting, if we're going to have children interpret why Goldilocks felt like she had to go in there and explore the Three Bears' home. Whatever the children say, that's their interpretation, right? That's what they're understanding at the moment. And so whenever you write an objective, one of these and within this wheel has to be in it. And the reason why is because now that turns that objective into a measurable objective. So for example, we can't say the child is going to learn about the child is going to learn their numbers, or the child is going to learn about Goldilocks. That objective is not measurable, right? Because you can't measure learning. But if you have children identify the first 5 numbers or the first 5 letters or something that they identify, that could be measured because we can observe it and we can see them doing that, right? And so that's more specific and measurable. And when you use Bloom's taxonomy, you'll see that there's 6 parts to it. And 1 to 6 basically is moves from lower level thinking to higher level thinking. So being able to listen to something is really important, but it's not critical thinking, right? But when you have to conjecturize or create and design and generate, that's critical thinking. So that's at a 6. And so many times, if you have a study or a theme that you incorporate within a month, in the beginning, maybe the first week of that study, we do want to build that foundation, right? We want to use we say lower level thinking, but that's foundational. That's the foundation of thinking. So we want to build that up. And as we move through the study throughout the weeks, we want to add more challenging, cognitively demanding experiences. And so using this Bloom's taxonomy wheel can help you in creating your lesson plans for your students. Okay, let me go back to this. Just grab me 1 second. And so content objectives, right? It's using Bloom's taxonomy to tell us what the children are going to process. And I also include language objectives. So language objectives will have 4 the things: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And so when you write a language objective, one of those 4 words or processes has to be in that sentence. So children will speak about something, something, something. Children will write about, Goldilocks' experience. Children will listen to something, or children will read about maybe what Goldilocks did, or another book related to Goldilocks. It just has to have one of those 4 processes: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So it's basically language arts. And that's important because sometimes we only focus on content. And if you have dual language learners, or just in general, anybody who's learning language, it's really important that we intentionally provide language experiences, not just cognitive ones. When you move to the right, like I mentioned last time, choose your top 5 key vocabulary words. So when you read a certain book like Goldilocks and the 3 Bears, what are the top 5 vocabulary words that you're going to use and focus on as you're reading the book? And if you recall, I talked about, don't just choose random words. Choose words that children can use to reason with. Sometimes we ask some higher order thinking questions, but they don't have the vocabulary words to answer. And so if we focus on key vocabulary words that includes basic, but also reasoning words, that's going to give them a chance to answer those higher order thinking questions. So you can put those there. And then the next row, you have higher order thinking skills, right? Or the COTS. That's really important. We can strategically write down what questions are you going to ask the children before, during, and after, right? Put those there. Many teachers will use little sticky tabs, and they'll write the question on the tab, and then they put it on the page where they're going to ask that question. And so when you're reading the book and you're turning the page, the tab will show up when it's time to ask a question. And then you ask the question, you engage the children, you take the tab, and then you put it in the back of the book, right? And then you're done. And then the last piece is, what are you doing before, during, and after the read aloud to engage children in critical thinking? So are you asking prediction questions? Are you building up knowledge of the key vocabulary words, right? So you might have something like the word porridge that many children may not have heard before. And so you build it up before you read the book. Has anybody heard about the word porridge? Has anybody eaten oatmeal before? You have kids raising their hands. Well, yeah, porridge is another word for oatmeal, and that builds up their knowledge, right? And that gets them ready. So when they see that in the book, they make that connection there. There's other metacognitive experiences you can do before, like predictions, conjectures, even picture walks, right? Where you turn the pages without reading the book. Just turn the pages so they can see the illustrations, and that builds background knowledge, and then you read the book. So that's another opportunity. During the read aloud, what are you doing? How are you engaging the children? What are you focused on? What strategies are you using during the book, right? Are you stopping to explain or define a key word? Are you asking questions about the character, about the illustrations, the math in something, right? What are you doing during the read aloud? And then afterwards, besides just recalling what happened, how are you engaging them in critical thinking? How are you connecting what you just read to books previously read, or books that you might read in the future, or experiences in children's own lives, right? Connecting the read aloud to children's lives. And so this one pager is one way to plan an instructional read aloud. And you can add strategies here and there. You can always modify it, right? But eventually what we want to do is have teachers do this organically, do this automatically, intuitively, right? Where they don't need this page anymore because it's already it's already built up in your framework, and this is the way you engage children organically during instructional read aloud time. So I'm going to pause here and would like some feedback on this page and questions you might have, or any other type of feedback. Let's see. I like it because it really makes teaching intentional. Okay, good. Yes. It's a great tool to use for books you haven't shared with kids before. Good. Yeah. Or to get new ideas about books you have read before. Good. This page, thank you, Sheila and Cheryl and Courtney. This page does seem like a lot, but I like how it takes you through step-by-step planning, shared read aloud. Yeah. Yeah, it's not a simple process. You're absolutely right. But I've noticed that, over time, it becomes organic. It becomes easier to use, and then it just becomes who you are, right? It's your way of being a high quality teacher, a high quality educator, where you have these things in mind and you apply them at will. Anybody else? Wonderful. Well, thanks for sharing. This lesson planner here can be used for any content area, okay? It doesn't have to be mathematical literature. It could be literacy. It could be science. It could be social and emotional learning. It could be anti-bias literacy, mathematical physics. Whatever content area you're focused on, this same sheet can be used. And that's what's pretty cool about it, that this knowledge transfers over. And eventually, that's what you see in high quality classrooms. Think about this, a teacher using this format to engage children everywhere. So I might be in the science area and I'm engaging children in planting, or a little garden, right? And the book now becomes material. So now we're using plants and the concepts for this. And I want this child to define or describe or design. And I want them to speak about it and listen to it and write about it. And these are the 5 top words I'm going to use as the child is planting his seeds. And before he's planting the seeds, I'm going to build up his background knowledge in this. While he's planting, I'm going to ask him questions about his experience. And then afterwards, we're going to conjecture, or we're going to connect this experience to the next read aloud and so forth. So a tool like this can be used all the time. And that's what you see in high quality educators, is they do this naturally. Oh, Julie says, I'm thinking of approaching it as a book club for the children. That's a good idea. That's a really good idea. Awesome. All right, so let me share with you one of my favorite authors and illustrators who was a 5-year-old, right? This kiddo. And we told him, over time, we allowed him to draw. He really loved to draw pictures. And so, when children love to draw pictures, we want them to keep drawing and take their time, give them some models, some real still life photos or objects like flowers for them to represent. And so this child wrote this book, this 3 pages. And he says, he was really smart. He knew how to write by then. He was going to kindergarten. He says, the tiger wants to jump off the branch, right? And what do you all notice about the drawing? And what do you notice about his writing? I would love it if one of you could come off mute and share your perspective. I know many of you did that last time. That'd be great to hear from you.
I can speak. I feel like this kid's got fabulous writing. Like, I wish that would be fabulous in my classroom. And even his drawing is very detailed. I think it's obvious his teacher has kind of done a little bit of pre-acquisition of like the skills that this child has. And like, they've talked about the parts of animals and what's special about a lion versus a bird versus what other animal.
So when you look at this illustration, think about all the math that the teacher is, and Courtney, you can talk if you're able to, if you have a mic. I noticed that you had unmuted. But think about how the teacher can mathematize this opportunity, right? Like the height of the tree, the patterns in the worms, the height of the porcupine spikes there. On the left side, you see the baby blue, the mama blue jay, and the baby blue jays that are on top there. The quantity of the apples and the owl inside the tree, the tiger that's on top of the branch with its patterns. And so forth. We move on page 2. Oh, okay, Courtney. She was speaking, but the mic doesn't work. No problem. You can write on the chat as well. Thanks for trying. So on page 2, and if you notice on the top, I forgot to mention, he put the letter B, which he said it stands for beginning, and M for middle. And so he says, then he got closer. I love how he spells closer. He almost got the rabbit, right? So this child, not only is the illustration spectacular, but his writing skills, right, he's already engaged in conventional writing, which is awesome. And then page 3, the tiger almost got the rabbit, but he ran away. Right, and so you see here, the tiger is so ferocious that everybody ran away. And the child said that the mama blue jay had to be brave because she has babies. And the porcupine didn't care because of the spikes. And everyone else ran away. And so this is a fun story, but we couldn't extend it, right? And that's what we did. We followed up with the child to extend the story. We mathematized the story. And so when we followed up, now he says the tiger wants to jump off the branch. The tiger is 65 inches high above the ground, right? So because we saw that he was interested in the height of the tiger, we brought in a tape measure, the ones you use to measure the clothing. And he counted to 65 and said, this is how high the tiger is. For page 2, he said, then he got closer. He almost got the rabbit. The tiger is 44 inches high above the ground. There are 39 inches between the tiger and the rabbit. So you can start to think about the conversation that the teacher is having with this child based off of what he said he was interested in, the kind of math he was interested in, and using that tape measure to think critically about that. Oh, okay. Thank you, Sheila. Can you try one more time? Because for some reason, if they heard you, then maybe, Courtney, can you try talking one more time to see if that works? Maybe it was on my end. I don't know.
Is it working now? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, there we go.
Perfect. Okay.
Awesome.
I was just saying earlier, that like this kid has really great writing, and like it's obvious that he like his teacher's done some kind of that front work where like they've talked about the different parts of animals and how animals look different. Yes. And he's very interested in this topic. And obviously the teacher's talked about beginning, middle, end of story, because he's labeled his text in that way. She's asked them to tell them what happened at the beginning, what happened in the middle. And I think, I ask my kids to retell me a story and I'll say, okay, what was first? But I don't know that I always use beginning, middle, end, which I know there's also value in ordinal terms.
Yes.
But I'm just like, this is a great way for this student to be able to retell. And he's hitting so many things. And he's obviously very interested in the math portion. Obviously, when we went back through and asked more questions and got more details, we can see that.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Please speak up anytime. I'm glad I could hear your voice now. But yeah, if we follow the children's lead, right, and we do the math that they're interested in, they stick to it for a while. And that's what this child did. The third page is pretty funny. So he says, the tiger almost got the rabbit, but he ran away. He ran 120 inches all the way to Illinois. And so that's what kids say, it's so amazing. 120 inches, that must have been far away in their minds, right? I love it. Thank you. All right, so let's hear one video. Give me 1 second here. Grab me 1 second while I start this video here. I'm gonna stop this. Share this. Okay. So in this instance, you have a child that is interested in superheroes, right? Hold on a second. Where is it? Can you all see this video playing? Just want to make sure you can see it.
Yes.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So in this instance, thank you. In this instance, you have children, or one child interested in superheroes. And so you'll see how the teacher engages them in a math literature experience.
Now comes Captain America.
Why are you adding more characters to the story?
Because I like all the presidents from the marbles. I'm gonna make Captain America and Hawk Smash.
So you like a lot of superheroes involved in your story. They're all going to contribute. Will they all have their own specific power?
Yep.
Playing, working.
I'm making a story.
So how will Iron Man help to protect the cat?
He's gonna make rocket powers.
Oh, so he's gonna shoot rockets.
Yep.
How far do you think the rocket will have to travel?
It will have to go across Captain America.
What does the power look like? Can you draw the power?
Explosion.
Show me the explosion. Whoa.
A long way to make it to the bad cat.
How far?
68.
Use your measuring tool.
That's not a fire. That's the fire went
Start at the starting point. Start with number 1. Find number 1.
Oh,
See how many inches away the energy. What is it? The power or the energy? Oh,
this is backwards.
it's backwards. Where's number 1? Look at the end. Found it?
Yep.
Number 1.
Okay.
Follow this travel.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Nope. It has to make it close to him. It has to make it into 23 hours.
23 inches?
Yep.
Very nice. That's pretty far away.
If you want to keep the table more longer, then you should check out this.
Stretch the measuring tape all the way across.
Whoa!
That's pretty long. How long is it?
50.
50 inches?
50 0.
5 0 is 50. What is this?
6. 6:30.
Well, 60.
60.
60 inches away?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. So take a few seconds to think about that interaction and share your thoughts. And feel free to unmute and share your perspective. You can also write on the chat.
I noticed when he was guided by the teacher, it really expanded his thinking. So like using the measurement tool, and then he didn't have quite the vocabulary, but he was then bringing in the numbers. And so he did really well with guidance from the adults in the room. It really made him, think mathematically.
Good catch. Good catch. Absolutely. Yeah. Anybody else catch any other important elements? Yeah, I totally agree that's that guidance, right? That brings the focus to it, their attention to hone in on what they're doing. The teacher followed. We kind of tag team too, right? But we followed the child's lead. We kept the superheroes topics on there. He was interested in energy and power and distance. And what I loved about it too is you hear the child using math language, right? Because we guided and we supported and we scaffolded and we kept in line with where his heart and mind was. We were able to create a composition. We were able to give him the language that then he used in reverse, right? In conversations with us. He was able to use tools to make sense of content. And it was a joyful experience. Right? So, and that's where that mathematical literature relationship comes into play, where you can still develop math, even if it's through a literature lens, but using high quality questioning, which is what we've been talking about for today and in the past series, is being able to engage in high quality questions at will. And then also using that tool we just talked about, the lesson planner, to think about opportunities as you're engaging with the child. That framework can come to mind, and you can think about, oh, well, we're about to get started on this engagement. What can I do before, during, and after? What are some objectives that I want? And so forth, to help facilitate that interaction. Awesome. All right. Okay, let's move on to mathematical physics. All right, this one's a lot of fun as well. And so in our state standards, right, we talk about developing beginning skills in the use of science and engineering practices, such as observing, asking questions, solving problems, and drawing conclusions. The other engineering science standard that meets this is this one: use tools, technology to assist with science and engineering investigations. Okay, so this is from the Illinois Early Learning and Development Standards for preschool. And so when you look at this picture here, what comes to mind? What engineering concepts are the children exploring, and what math can be included based off of the materials that are provided? You can feel free to write on the chat or unmute and share your ideas. And as you're thinking and writing, I'll give some context here. So you have this teacher. The children were this is in Chinatown, by the way, in Chicago. They were interested in a bridge that was nearby their childcare center. And so they went to the bridge, they explored it, they took a photo, and you see the photo there. And then they brought some materials and they explored the materials. They tried out different designs. And then eventually, this is a design that they chose and are completing at the moment. So what math possibilities are there in this scenario? What kind of math language and questions can the teacher ask during this opportunity here? So Sheila writes height and length, absolutely. Measurement. How long, how much paint is needed? Oh, I like that one. How much paint is needed, right? That's a good one. Data analysis. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of data analysis opportunities, right? So for example, how many of the children cross the bridge to get to school? Balance, yeah, balance is science, so that's good. Absolutely. The patterns, you caught that one, right, Julie? Thank you. The patterns in the railing, absolutely. And so there's tons, right? There's tons of opportunities for engineering experiences based off of what it's in our immediate environment. We have structures all around us. We have functional things. When we talk about engineering, those are the two fundamental components with young children that we want to focus on: structure and function. Structure and function. And so can they build something, right? Maybe we provide some materials and they build the school that they're in. They build a little model. And maybe there's an elevator that's functional, right? So how do we create an elevator that moves up and down in the building that we constructed? Or maybe we build a cart to move things around to see how much, what pumpkins can, which cart can hold the heaviest pumpkins, or what size pumpkins fit in the cart. Or maybe you're creating a birdhouse with a tree that's outside the school, and you're trying different roof materials to see which one works, right? You can try some tissue as a roof. You can try some paper, and then you can go to your local hardware store and get some, a roofing tile, and then test them out and see what works. And that's a cool experience there. There's tons of opportunities for engaging children in engineering processes. And so we go back to our Bloom's taxonomy, right? All of our objectives should have one of these words in there, and that way it makes it measurable. And so I wanted to share with you all, actually, there's a video I want to share. Grab me 1 second, please. All right. There we go. So this video is a mathematical physics video. It's a preschool classroom, a small group, and the teacher is going to engage the children in this experience. What I'd like you to do, now that we've been together for a while, try to code how many times the teacher asks a higher level thinking question. So if you have a piece of paper, you don't have to write down the question that he asked, but just tally it, okay? Just tally how many higher level thinking questions the teacher asks. And see what kind of questions he asks. Were they math? Were they another content area? But more importantly, let's try to code the higher order thinking questions that he asked.
What? It fell down. Why do you think it fell down?
Because it's too little, because it's heavier.
Do we need to make it heavier? Yeah. Okay, well, I have some dominoes too. I wanted to see if we could use our dominoes for it to carry. Do you think it'll carry 10 dominoes?
No.
No? Should we try?
4.
You think 4? All right. Luis said 4. Let's try with 4. How many? Wait. Let's see. How many are in there already?
1, 2,
4. There's 4 in there already. Luis said we'll carry 4. Okay, do you think that's going to work?
Because it's too heavy.
It's too heavy? Let's see if remember how we talked before about the need to spin? What happened? You need to make it easier so that you flip over?
Yeah.
Okay, what do we need? Let's look at our car first. I have more parking. Add 2. You want to add 3? Okay. All right. Daisy, will you put it on there and see if it goes down? Is it working now?
Yeah.
Do you want to try with more dominoes again?
Yeah.
All right, let's see. How about Tatiana? Do you want to add more dominoes in here? How many more do you think we can fit in here? 5? Okay, can you pick up 5 dominoes and add them in there? All right, did 5 more fit? And does it roll?
No.
What is your car? Okay. All right. Are all these wheels rolling the same direction? If they want it to go forward, right, but it's not going the same way as the other wheels? No, what can you do to fix it so they all go the same way?
Like this? Give me another one.
Daisy, come over and take a pic. Which one is going to carry dominoes easier? You want to try a plate? Is it going to work on top of it? Does it still roll? Hold on, stop with the plate. It slid on top of it, didn't it? How can this carry dominoes though? I like that idea though. It sits a bit across the table really quickly, right? Do you want to try this? All right, how many dominoes do you think yours can carry? 4. Okay, we can go for 4. How many? Ava, where's your cup? How many dominoes can yours carry? Okay, here's 1. How's it gonna fit on top of there?
Okay.
Without pushing it, see what happens. See if it'll just stand still and hold it up.
I need
Need some tape? It is going to fall. Oh, look, it's not falling now. Oh, there it goes. We need some tape.
Okay. So take a few seconds here to think about that experience, tally up how many questions you noticed, and then either share on the chat or you can unmute and share your perspective. Can we have someone unmute and share what they thought about that video and that interaction? Oh, okay, Julie. She said it was hard to hear some of what the teacher was saying. I counted over 15 math-related questions out. That's really good. What about others?
I noticed when he was guiding their thinking, he would question and they would answer and then they would test it out and then kind of change their thinking and go back and try it again.
Yes.
So I like that.
Awesome, Sheila. Thank you. I agree. You can see the cognitive activity that's happening because of the type of inquiry that he's using. It's promoting critical thinking, right? And
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what happens in high quality classrooms. You'll have children that hypothesize a lot, come up with a lot of theories and testing and more hypotheses and testing, right? Instead of just direct teaching where you're just learning facts or learning to memorize things.
Right. He was really making them go deeper in their thinking. So by guiding them.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. Thanks for sharing, Sheila. I appreciate it. Cheryl mentions by asking the questions, he was keeping them engaged in the activity. Yeah. And if you noticed, all the kids were engaged, right? And they all learned to respect each other's perspectives. They all took turns. You know, not that this is always going to happen, but when you have a classroom where the culture it has a math inquiry culture, right? Then that's what occurs. There's a lot of mathematical thinking happening, a lot of engagement, a lot of theories, a lot of hypotheses. And I even loved when that little girl used the plate, right? Because the vehicle wasn't rolling correctly, so she tested out, see if the plate works. I put down that he asked 10 higher order thinking questions and 9 lower level thinking questions. Not that the lower level questions are wrong, they're really good. You need those, right? Like that's part of it. We just can't have, that just can't be everything or the only type of questions that are asked. So he asked, how many more can fit? How can we fix it? The wheels rolling. How many dominoes can fit inside? How it can, how are we going to make it fit? And then some of the kids, some of their solutions, a little girl used a plate, right, as an idea to push the car. And then another one talked about using tape to keep the dominoes, the cup from falling over. So those are logical solutions, right? That may or may not work, but hey, we got the children thinking, and that's what counts.
I
Okay.
think too, those lower end questions, they make kids feel successful, so they're not afraid to kind of take a risk, even if their thinking is wrong, because you've built up their confidence by giving them the lower, the lower
Yes,
the lower ended questions, so that they're not afraid to take a risk in some of those deeper thinking
I love that.
questions.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, right? That SEL component of
Right.
making them feel that they're capable, right? That's wonderful. Yeah, that's another reason why when we say lower level thinking, it's just the cognitive activity, but it's still important. It's super important. We just don't want to stay there. We want to be able to mix it, mix high level, middle level, higher level questions. Cheryl mentioned it is important to ask all levels of questions so that you don't leave any child behind that maybe can't answer the high level questions. Absolutely. Yes, I talked about being able to shift gears, right? Like we used to drive cars, standard cars, not automatic cars in the past. But if we're able to shift gears from, you can ask a higher level thinking question. If they don't get it, shift back, try to guide it. If they still don't get it, shift back and ask a closed-ended lower level question and play it by ear, right? Depending on where the child is, follow their lead, but build the capacity to ask those questions at will. And so being able to shift and transform those questions within any context in the classroom, that's what's super important for educators. All right. So lastly, I wanted to share with you a thinking protocol. And last time I shared, it was a learning protocol, right? Where we had different materials, and throughout the protocol, throughout the 2-week protocol, it was a 10-step. The materials became more cognitively demanding as the children engaged in them, right? So the first day, maybe they drew some pictures. The second day, they had more, they had different materials to work with. They had watercolors, which is a little bit more difficult. And then they had recyclable materials and so forth, right? This one's called the thinking protocol. And this one is based off of Bloom's taxonomy, the wheel, the thinking verbs. And so when you see the wheel, remember I mentioned lower level thinking is a stage 1, and then it gets more cognitively demanding when you go up the stages, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, depending on what you're doing. So this thinking protocol is based off of the thinking verbs. So if you look at this protocol, the first day, the children construct something, then they identify something. The next day, maybe they're either drawing, the following day they're describing, the following day they're constructing, following day comparing, following day analyzing, and that's the pattern, right? Think about how intentional this is. We're lesson planning based off of how demanding the thinking is for the children. And this is something that's really beneficial because when you use the lower level thinking experiences, even though they're lower level, they're building the foundation for harder things that are coming up in the near future, right? And that's what happens here. So I'll show you the whole protocol. So in step one, and I'm going to ask for your feedback on this protocol afterwards. So think about your takeaways for this experience and how you can see yourself using this in your classrooms or at your centers, and so forth. So in step one, the children constructed a theater. And what happened is during circle time, the whole group, a couple of the girls had gone to the local theater, right, to watch movies. And they were so excited to share that experience. And so what they did, is they constructed a theater with blocks, and that's what you see there. And so, and that's what naturally, right, what happens. Children will go to the block area, they'll use some blocks, they'll use some materials, and it may not look like a theater, but that's a representation, right? That's what they had at the moment. And so what the teacher did the following day, they brought a photo and they used a smart board. And you can use a projector, you can use a big picture, you can use a computer, a screen monitor. And they showed the Congress Theater, right? That's downtown. That's this beautiful space. And so the children identify elements in the theater. And so when you look at this photo, it's full of math, right? Just the theater, besides it being gorgeous, it's full of patterns. It's full of rows and shapes and lighting. So it's such a beautiful illustration or photo. And so the teacher wrote down what the children identified on a chart paper. And then afterwards, they went to draw a picture of the photo itself. And so you see the children with markers, they're drawing their photos, or drawing. And as the children are experiencing these activities, the teacher's mathematizing, right? So if one of us were there with the children who are drawing, they're drawing the patterns that they see on the picture. There's rows of 10, there's patterns of 10, there's patterns on the ceiling, there's shapes against the wall. So we're just having a mathematical conversation with the children. And so here, the following day, you have the describing portion. And here, before they identified things that they found in the theater, this time they're describing the things that they identified. And so the children here describe the mathematical properties and attributes found in the photo. So maybe they saw the sun that's in the theater, and now they describe it, right? Like it's round, it has shapes, it has lines, there's squares, there's curved lights, and so forth. So it's all math. And then the children go back the following day and they use a photo in the background to build their theater with blocks. And now you start seeing the difference, right? Now you start seeing a structure and you start seeing actual patterns. And the teacher is mathematizing once again. The following day, they're comparing two different theaters, the Congress Theater and the theater, the Pritzker Pavilion, right? And that's another beautiful theater. And now the children are comparing the mathematical differences between the two of them. And she's writing it down on the board. They go back to their drawing, to their journals. And if you notice the photo on the right, I photoshopped the children's construction into the picture of the theater. So we basically, what they created the previous day, and you can Photoshop it, or you can just copy and paste it and copy it on a scanner or on the copy machine. But they were excited to see what they had built previously is now in the photo, and it looks exactly the way they observed it previously. So they're analyzing. And then they assess the next day to see what's working, what doesn't work. The child is sharing her story with the whole group. And then in the ninth step, the children are explaining what they did, how they used the photo to represent those objects or the theater with blocks, and they share that. And then at the end, the final project, the children use Legos and other materials, just open-ended materials, to represent the Pritzker Pavilion with creative and constructive materials. And this is them with their accomplishment, showing off their work. And so, yeah, if we have a couple minutes left. Wow, time flew really fast. We have 3 minutes. If we can get some to unmute and share what you think about this protocol. Sheila says, wow. Okay, good. That's a good reaction.
I just loved how the teacher followed through with the kids' interests and what they were doing, and kept expanding it and made it come to life for them. That's something they'll remember for forever.
I love that. Yes, that's it. That's it. That makes it come to life. I love that. Thank you, Sheila. How about others? What are your thoughts? Future architect, says Julie. Yes, that's what we want. That's what we want. We want to give children the opportunity to be future architects, future engineers, future teachers, future, all these wonderful roles that will help the community thrive. Darcy mentions that they are very proud. Yeah, you can tell, right, by their little stands how proud they are of their accomplishments. And remember how it started. It started with block play, that, it's just putting stuff together and calling it a theater. But when you delve deep into it and you create it into a study and you mathematize, it can end into a great composition. And every time we've done this, I've done this with hundreds of teachers, it's always different, right? And that's what's beautiful about this, because when you bring in the teacher's talents and the children's interests and the neighborhood, they're all going to be different. And they're all valid and they're all special. And so you can use this tool, another tool, to plan, right? So I gave you a lesson planner to plan your experiences, your literature experiences and other ones. And this protocol is another way. If you use the Bloom's taxonomy wheel that I shared with you, you can create your own thinking protocol based off of your own thinking and creativity to provide these long-term, wonderful scaffolding experiences with children. Julie says, this is a wonderful example of why classroom needs blocks enough. Yes, enough blocks. Absolutely. You need enough blocks to build something substantive, something wonderful. And if there's not enough blocks, yeah, it limits the creativity and the potential learning there. Okay, my friends, well, it's 5:30. And that means that